Hey guys, it's Belle, and in this video we are going to be reading through and commenting on chapter 23 from Braulio of Zaragosa's Vita Sancti Emiliani, the life of Saint Emilian, who was a saint who lived during the Roman period in Spain, and of course this is set during these, I believe, the persecutions. Now, the reason I've chosen this chapter to round off Pride Month is because not only does it describe an asexual saint, it would appear, because there are several accounts of asexual saints, but what's fascinating about this is that it appears to show a recognition of asexuality as a condition, as a way that a person can be, which is unique among the medieval texts that I've thus far encountered. So this might be the earliest reference to a phenomenon which we would now call asexuality, as an object, so to speak. So without any further ado, let's get on with it. As usual, if you want to have a go at translating this on your own, feel free to pause the video and write out your translation. So I'll read out the chapter and then we'll go through it. Ipsi quoque desertore spiritus, cum convicis eo malitiae suae caliditate per ergomenos vellent lacessere, quia nihil erat quod Christi servo possent obicere, solum ei cur cum virginibus Christi cohabitaret nitebantur exprobare. Antiqua suae inimicus arte eludens, quoniam quem opere non potes dicere, saltem famma in stat polluere, et cuius non prevallet conscientiam infamat vitam. Videlicet irrecitis suis ilecebris offerens exempla consolationis, dum esse bonum neminem putant, et quem imitare in bonis ebeant invenire despertant, ac per hoc penes se remedium arbitrantur, sin nemo innocens inveniatur, et reper damnationem suam multitudine per euntium consolantur. Quid tibi repertor malorum prodesse potest infamia Christi servorum, cum eis Dominus redemptorque suus per gloriam et ignobilitatem, per infamiam et bonam famam promittat regna caelorum. Sed viris de sanctus, abstinentiae et humanitati etiam in senectute deditus, usque habitabet cum sacris virginibus, et cum esset ab 80 vitae suae et deinceps anno, labore sancto dolereque conscriptus, omnia officia, ut patre poterat, anciliarum Dei ministerio suscipiebat blandus, sed iam, ut premissi, ita ane fannis incitamentis erat extraneus, ut ne vestigium quidem in honesti mortus in illa etate fuerit expertus, nam quia in tante pervenerat longa etate, eo pervenit necessitatis, ut cum hydropis laboraret invalidudine, ab eisem sanctis feminis corpus sum lavaris ineret, et ipse ab omni illictus sensu alienus esset. Hoc certe illud est speciale beneficium, quod paucis invenimus fuisse collatum, et a nullo debeat experiri, nec succedat periculum temeritati. Unus quisque enim in qua vocatione vocatus est, in ea permaneat apud Deum. David enim dicit, quia non ambulavi in magnis, nec in mirabilibus super me. Ille quipe in mirabilibus super se ambulat, qui eaque divinitus illi non sunt collata agere pertentat. All right, so what does it all mean? The first sentence is quite long, but we'll tackle the nominatives and the verbs first. So, ipsi quoque desertores spiritus. Also, these deserters of the spirit. So this might refer to Arian Christians. It could also refer to just atheists, pagans. Velent lacessere. They were wishing to harm or attack him, eum. Cum convicis, with their neighbours. Caliditate malitiae suae, in the cruelty of their malice. Per energumenos. Now this is a really interesting one because it's a Greek loanword which suggests that Braulio had a very high level of education and/or high degrees of contact with Byzantines if he's using a Greek loanword here. because this is not the kind of loan word that very often comes in through dictionaries either. So per energumenos is like through their efforts or through their labors. It seems to be the meaning that it has in this sense. Quia nihil erat quod Christi sero possunt obicere, because there was nothing that they could obicere, throw in front of the servant of Christ, solum, except that, or only, they could sort of demand of him, cur cum virginibus Christi cohabitaret, why he was dwelling with the virgins of Christ. Now this word virgin, as Tertullian talks about, in theory can refer to male and female virgins, but on its own, it's one of those rare words in Latin where the word without any special qualification on its own refers to a female virgin. So, nitebantur exprobare, they were hoping rather to test or to ask why he lives with the virgins. And this is, of course, Saint Emilian, whom they're testing. Antiqua sua inimicus arte illudens, the enemy deceiving people with his ancient art, antiqua sua arte, quoniam quem opere non potes dicere, because that man who, quem, and that's referring again to Saint Emilian, opere, by his deed, non potes dicere, he cannot tear him down. So because the enemy cannot tear down Emilius by his work, saltem fama instat polluere, he seeks to pollute him via rumour, by fame. Et cuius non prevalet conscientiam, and when he is not able to pollute his conscience, as in Saint Emilian's own mind, infamat vitam, Satan defames his life. And this is what's happening with them asking publicly why he lives with the sacred virgins. Fidelicet irretitis suis illecebris offerens exempla conslationis. So namely, the devil tricks people by offerens, offering exempla consolationis, the examples of consolation, irretitis suis illecebris, with his illicit or with his lascivious snares, basically. And the consolation here is dum esse bonum neminem putant. So the hope is that humans will think that neminem, nobody, bonum esse, is a good man. Et quem imitardi in bonis debeant invenire desperant. And desperant, they lose hope in venire, to find quem, a person whom, imitardi in bonis debeant, who they should imitate in good deeds. So the way that the devil is tricking people here is he's putting the notion into their heads that nobody is good, and so if they can tear down the reputation of a man who appears to be good publicly, then this gives them excuse to live in sin, because if everybody's living in sin, then at least they're not alone, as we'll see here. Ac per hoc, but on account of this, penes say, by their own judgment, by their own account, remedium arbitrantur, they reckon or they judge what the remedy for this should be. Si nemo innocens inveniatur, if nobody should be found to be innocent, et damnationem suam multitudine perunsum consolantur, they are at least consolantur, damnationem sum, or they sort of console their damnation, multitudine per euntium, with a multitude of people who are going around, basically, so of people who are going to endure the same thing. So the trick the devil is laying is making people think that, well, nobody's good after all, everybody's going to hell in a handbasket, and at least I'm not the only one, so I might as well live in sin. And here the narrator uses rhetorical questions to address Satan directly. Quid tibi, what does it matter to you? Or what good does it do you? Repertor malorem, you discoverer of evils or inventor of evils. Prodesse potest infamia Christi servorum. what can the infamy of Christ's servants avail you? Cum eis Dominus Redemptor Jesus, when the Lord and Redeemer to them promitat reina celorum, he promises the kingdoms of heaven, per gloriam et ignobilitatem, through glory and ignobility, per infamiam et bonam fama, through infamy and through good reputation. So the narrator is asking Satan, why are you bothering to try to tear down the reputation of good people when they're going to inherit the kingdom of heaven? So now let's get on to the actual good human himself. Said, vir iste sanctus, but this holy man, abstinentiae et humanitatis etiam senectute deditus. So he was dedicated abstinentiae to abstinence et humanitati, and to humanity, etiam in senectute, even in his old age. Utique habitabat cum sacris virginibus. He was always living with the sacred virgins. Et cum esset ab 80 vitae suae dengeps anno. And when he was past the 80th year of his life, labore sanctoreque constrictus, so having been constrained or bound by the holy labour and holy struggle or pain, omnia officia ut pater paterat anciliarum Dei ministerio suscipiebat blandus. So this is all sort of one thing, and we'll tackle it, ignoring these three words here to begin with. So blandus means the nice man. Suscipiebat, he was taking up omnia officia, all of these services, ministerio, through the ministry, anciliarum Dei, of the maidens or the sort of handmaidens of God, ut pater poterat, as a father is able to. So this is sort of implying that his relationship to them is more paternal than anything else. Sed iam ut premissi, but already, as I've said before, ita a nefandis incitamentis erat extraneus. He was thus removed, extraneus, a nefandis incitamentis, or he was alien to accursed incitements, ut ne vestigium quidem in honesti mortus in illa aetate fuerit expertus, so that he hadn't experienced fuerit expertus, ne fuerit expertus, vestigium quidem, not even the trace or a sort of track in honesti mortus of an dishonest motion in illa aetate, in that age. So this man had gotten to the age of more than rather 80 years old and had not even had the trace of sexual arousal from these accursed temptations. Nam quia in tanta pervenerat longa aetate, for since he had arrived in such an advanced age, eo pervenit necessitatis, it came to him from necessity, ut cum hydropis laboraret in valetudine, so that when he was suffering with the sickness of dropsy, which is some illness that, I'll be honest, I don't know what its symptoms are, ab eistem sanctis feminis corpus suum lavari sineret, he would allow his body, sineret lavari corpus suum, ab eistem sanctis feminis, by these same holy women. Et ipse ab omni illicito sensu alienus esset, and that man was alien, alienus, ab omni illicito sensu, from every illicit feeling, and the word illicit here, of course, referring to the sort of sexual arousal that may come from being birthed by virgin women. Now, here we have two references here to him not experiencing sexual attraction, not seeing the desire. Part of the difficulty in identifying asexuality in medieval texts is that it is an absence, and just like in the real world, and just like with headcanons of characters in media in the present day, the fact that a character doesn't express desire or say sexual attraction to another human within the context of a given story doesn't mean that that character never does. It just means that we haven't seen them do it in these particular instances. So to identify a character as asexual, it doesn't necessarily even prove that they're asexual, but if they say that they never have any kind of sexual desire, as for instance, I believe, spoilers for Game of Thrones, I believe Varys, the eunuch, does in A Song of Ice and Fire on HBO. He says that he had no desire for sexual relations. He explicitly says that, and as does Todd Chavez and BoJack Horseman. So that's like one way that you can see it, and another one is by having that character repeatedly reject advances. But this approach is a bit uncertain because the character could be rejecting advances because they are attracted to a different sex than the person who is giving those advances, or because they're just not into any of those particular people, but they are still attracted to some people. So it's not a certain way of saying it, but this text goes out of its way to say he does not have any desire. He's far removed from accursed temptations, and he was removed from any illicit sense, even when people are doing actions to him which in other people might elicit a sexual response. So here we have a pretty direct reference to asexuality, the only more explicit reference I've seen, and I'll be doing a whole, probably more video essay formatted video on this saint's life because it's so interesting. But Saint Julian of Antioch, explicitly saying, I do not have the desire to engage in this stuff, is the only example in a medieval text that I know of which is more explicitly referencing asexuality. But this text is about to reference something which is like asexuality, because this goes to the essentialist kind of approach to looking at queer figures in history. You would have a sort of postmodernist approach, which might say that terms such as asexuality are products of the modern era and they are structured according to the desires of modern power structures, and therefore they don't necessarily hold true for the medieval past, which is a convincing argument, and it's important to bear in mind. There are alternative views to that more Foucauldian view of history, such as that advanced by John Boswell, which would argue that the terms we use today to describe sexuality, such as gay, lesbian, straight, asexual, etc., and bi, the argument from an essentialist perspective would be that all of these terms are describing some kind of essential pattern in human experiences, which is going to recur across history. And therefore, people in various societies across time and space will be talking around the subject, and they will be identifying something which has the same traits, even if cultures may associate different things with those traits, and even if cultures may not use exactly the same word or may not have one word which describes all of those same traits in the same way that ours do. They will nonetheless be describing the same phenomenon, because the phenomenon is constant. That's the difference between an essentialist and a postmodernist view. The essentialist view of LGBT identities in the past would be that sexuality is a phenomenon and an experience which is constant throughout history, whereas the postmodernist view would say that actually the experience and the way we understand that is historically contingent. So that's the big difference. I would say that this next sentence that we're about to read gives some weight to an essentialist reading of history, because it shows that the writer, Braulio of Zaragosa, he's clearly aware that there is something, a phenomenon that is different about Emilianus because he doesn't experience this attraction. And he doesn't quite, he puts a name to it. He just doesn't call it sexuality. But he's aware of this phenomenon, basically. So let's get on to that sentence. Hoc certe illud est speciale beneficium, quod paucis invenimus fuisse collatum, et a nullo debeat experiri, ne succedat periculum temeritati. So, what this means is, hoc certe illud est speciale beneficium. This referring to the fact that Saint Emilianus was alien from all illicit sensation. Est speciale beneficium, it's a special benefit, quod paucis invenimus fuisse collatum, which we have found to have been given to a few men, and this probably is referring to people in his own time period as well. So we've got a reference from Braulio of Zaragosa of asexual people in Visigothic Spain when this story was written, so go us. Et a nulla debeat experiri, and it should be tested by nobody, ne succedat periculum temeritati, lest the danger catch up to a person's temerity or rashness. So basically he's saying you shouldn't like try it out to see if you're asexual, just in case you're not and you fall into sin, which is very funny. Unus quisque, this is a very sweet sentence coming up next. Unus quisque enim in qua vocatione vicatus est, in ea permaneat apud Deum. So let each person remain in that vocation in which he was called among God or before God's eyes. David enim dicit, for David said, quia non ambulavi in magnis nec in mirabilibus super me, for I did not walk among the great men, nor among miraculous things or miracles above me. Ille quipe in mirabilibus super se ambulat. He indeed walks in miracles super se above himself, qui eaque divinitus illi non sunt collata, agere pertentat. Now the syntax here is very difficult, but so qui agere pertentat is he who tries to enact those things, que, which, divinitus, divinely, illi, to him, non sunt collata, they were not given to him. So what he's saying is you shouldn't, I don't know, be bathed by virgins to test whether you're asexual, because that's living a kind of lifestyle that God hasn't called you to. And the way that one identifies that calling is by, at least from the context of this text, is the presence or absence of a given kind of sexual desire. So one's sexual orientation, as we would put it in the present day. So he's almost saying, like, you can't change people's orientation. God, that's what God has set them up to be. People's sexual orientations have come from God, according to this text, because he is called into this vocation. And one shouldn't try to act in a way not according to their orientation, according to Braulio of Zaragosa. And there we go. That is chapter 23 of the Life of Saint Emilian by Braulio of Zaragosa. I will put a link in the description of this video to the whole text, that you can read it on Corpus Corporum. And if you'd like me to do a video breaking down the whole story, I'd be happy to do so, although it's quite a bit longer than I have time to do in a tidbit video. So I hope you guys enjoyed that early reference to asexuality in the Gothic literature. So thank you so much for watching. If you want me to teach Latin or any of the other languages I do on this channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon, which will be linked in the description of this video. You can also join my Discord server, where I tend to post these glosses as tidbits before I turn them into videos. And until last time, this is going to be the last video going out for Pride Month of 2022. So happy Pride Month to all of my LGBT siblings, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye everyone.